Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, see me again with Bu Elo. Around 10 minutes, I would like to present about the instruments of qualitative research. This is the special edition of the video because besides I would like to go to the theory and then example of the article talking about the instrument, but I also would like to give the example for each instrument dealing with the qualitative research. Before that, now let's begin by reciting Umul Kitab, please. Let's begin by the definition of the instrument in a research, especially for the qualitative. Here we have the definition. The research instrument is a tool, device, or technique used to collect, measure, and analyze data related to a research question or hypothesis. Therefore, we have the characteristics how to create a good research instrument. First of all, it should be valid, reliable, clear, practical, and ethical. Because the validity and then reliability, clarity, practicality, and ethical points are very important to be conducted in creating or measuring the instrument itself. The first we have to go to the validity itself. Okay, valid here means that the instrument must measure what it is intended to measure. Then talking about the reliability or reliable, the results should remain consistent if repeated under the same conditions. How about the clear ones? It is about the questions and instruction must be clear and unambiguous. Going to the practical, the instrument should be easy to administer and appropriate for the research setting. The ethical, here the instrument should respect participants' right and confidentiality. How about the purpose, the nature of question, data output, design, researchers' role, examples, strengths, limitation, and use cases of the qualitative research instrument. Now let's go down to the first one. Talking about the purpose, that the qualitative research instrument is exploring, interpreting, and understanding the meaning. For the nature of the question, it should be open-ended, flexible, and adaptive. What about the data output? It is in the form of the words, themes, stories, and narratives. The design could be context dependent and also flexible. About the researcher's role, it could be active participant or only the interpreter for the position or the role. Talking about the example, here I have 4 items: in-depth interview guide, focus group prompts, observation protocol fit notes, document analysis framework. There are strengths in having the qualitative research instrument. They are providing deep and its insights, capturing emotions and experiences, and being flexible in dynamic setting. Besides the strengths, we can find the limitation inside. They are time consuming, harder to generalize, and maybe the interpretation could be subjective. Now we move on to the last item, that is use cases. Here we have the case studies in education and then community needs assessment. And then the last sub-points or sub-items is cultural or ethnographic research. Those are the things which are very important to be derived coming from the qualitative research instrument. Now let's move on to the types of qualitative research instrument. The first is the interview, participants' perspective and create profound interpretation of their experiences. Observation, observing behaviors, interactions, and contexts in a more natural setting, allowing them to capture social phenomena. Surveys, collecting rich, descriptive data that provides in-depth insights into people's experiences, opinions, and motivations, helping to explore complex phenomena and understand the why behind behaviors, often to inform future quantitative studies or to gain a deeper understanding of a topic. Questionnaires explore how and why questions, uncover unique narratives, and identify themes for further investigation. About focus group, as one of the type of qualitative research instrument, it explores complex topics through group interaction and discussion while gathering information from multiple respondents. The document accesses large pools of information stored in text, books, documents, and artifacts. The last is the footnotes, capturing the rich and complex context in which the investigation happens. The first one, interviews divided into structure, semi-structure, and unstructured. The first one is for having job interview with set questions, and then research interview with guiding question, and then the last example is open-ended conversation with a participant. Let's go down to the interview. There are personal and demographic information as the example enrollment status. For example, are you a transfer student? And if so, how long have you been here? The next is general patterns of library use. For example, how often do you come? Estimate what percentage of your overall study takes place in the library. Where do you generally like to work in the library? What else do you do schoolwork besides the library? The third point is this visit. Why are you here? Including time spent already, how long do you expect to be here? Why do you select this specific spot? Now we move on to the observations. There are three types with the example. The first is participant, open-ended conversation with a participant, non-participant, a teacher observing classroom behavior, controlled lab-based behavior experiment, naturalistic watching interactions in a marketplace. Here, the example of the observations. There are 6 columns, okay, talking about dimension, classroom assessment scoring system, framework for teaching, protocol for language arts teaching observation, mathematical quality of instruction, youth observational protocol as the last column. How about the survey? There are 4 types also. Cross-sectional for the example students satisfaction survey, longitudinal tracking teachers engagement over years, online, Google form survey, paper-based printed feedback form after events. This is the example about the form of the survey. So coming from the general accuracy, clarity of expression, and then there will be the acronym below the figure or table here, NDAL JDGR, no improvement, a little improvement, good improvement, great improvement. So you may put a tick inside, okay, the column you refer to. Now we go to the questionnaire. There are 3, okay, open-ended, close-ended, and mixed format. For the first example questionnaire type, there is the open-ended. It comes to the opinion polls with multiple choice questions. And then the second one, research questionnaire with narrative responses. For the third example, for the third type also, it goes to the student scores evaluation with both skills and comments. This is the example of the questionnaire form. There are language skill here, only reading. I would like to show you with 10 questions and then the level from 1 to 5 by using Likert scale. But I Propose that you only use 4 items. Okay, yeah. So the neutral here, number 3, should be deleted. So only strongly disagree 1, disagree 2, agree would be 3, and then strongly agree would be 4. Now, how about the focus group? There are 2 types here. Exploratory means that a group discussion on new curriculum design, as the example. And then the evaluation based feedback session on public speaking. The next type of the instrument is document with the subtypes of personal, for the example diaries and letters, official goes to meeting minutes and government reports, organizational corporate reports, and for the public there are media articles and websites. Now we move on to the field notes. There are 3 types: descriptive, reflective, and context setting. For the descriptive, the example is detailed observation, conversation, and setting. The second type could be the personal thoughts, analysis, and interpretation. Meanwhile, for the third type belongs to the logistical information like dates, times, and location. This is the example of field notes. So you may use the handwriting rather than the type. But I'm sure that if you modify it with the digital, seems like in the notes of the gadget and then your tab, that would be alright. Because the technology could be different from the previous. How to choose the right research instrument? The first, you have to define research objective. It needs meaning, experience, or detailed perspective, interview guide, focus group, protocol. Later, please identify variables and phenomena. For example, in the abstract concepts dealing with attitudes, perceptions, experiences, and cultural practice. Here, the example is very clear, exploring how students cope with stress. So, you may use interviews or focus group. The next step is consider the target population. If you have large and diverse population, you may use structured and standardized tool, for example, survey. If you have small and specialized group, you may use in-depth and flexible tools, for example, interviews and observations. How about if you have the access concern, you may choose instruments suited to literacy level, language, or cultural context. Move to the next step, that is balancing practical factor. If it belongs to time constraint, survey are faster. For big groups, interviews take more time. How about the resources aspect? Okay, so do you have budget for testing kits, survey, or recording equipment? Talking about the expertise, do you have skills to analyze thematic data? After balancing practical factors, we go to evaluating validity and reliability. So in this case, you have to ensure the credibility, trustworthiness, and cultural sensitivity of question. Later, decide on primary and secondary instrument. For example, in the primary data collection, you will use questionnaire and interview. However, in the secondary data analysis, you may use existing datasets, reports, and documents. Finally, you come up with the aligning research design. For case study or ethnography, you require qualitative tools, for example, observation and interviews. For mixed method, you may combine both, for example, survey and interview. This is how to decide guide quickly. You need deep understanding of experiences, for example, interview, focus group, and field notes. If you want to explore cultural and social context, you may use case study and ethnographic observation. But if you want to create the mix or want both breadth and depth, you may use survey and interview. This is the way how the example of research instrument worked. There will be the left side, semi-structured interview guide exploring teacher experience. The next one is classroom observation checklist. Okay, that's all. This is the longest video I have, I think. Hopefully you may use one of or maybe two instruments inside your research conducting your final project. Thank you. See you in the next video. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.